Good.
All right, we're going to open up a geared motor and check the lubrication inside. So remove your axle hardware. And set this aside. You'll see 6 screws around the outside of the motor. They may be silver, they may be black. We're going to undo these. I'm using a drill because I've done this a lot of times and I'm comfortable with it. I have the torque turned down fairly low so that it doesn't strip the heads of the screws out. You can use a regular screwdriver and be a little more careful if you like to. Whatever you do, don't turn the torque up high. If you strip these screws out, you'll have a much bigger problem to deal with. Just got the screws out and set aside. You can take the axle hardware off. The other side, this hardware can be a little more difficult to take off because you may have a spacer on there. And then you can just push the internals of the motor free. In order to get full lubrication, you're going to need the motor to be spinning. You see through here is the internals in the motor. In order to get the motor spinning, I'm going to very carefully run it in a work stand here. If you're doing it at home, you need a bench vise or something because if you run the motor without something holding the axle, you're going to twist the wire up and you're going to ruin your motor. So make sure something is holding the axle if you're going to move it. Otherwise, you can turn it or have an assistant help you turn the shell backwards. You see how the gears turn when I turn the shell backwards? But in the interest of time, I'm just going to do it like this, which is a little quicker. You have to use a grease that's compatible with what's in here. If there's a whole lot of grease already, then you should probably clean the old grease out carefully. You don't have to go too crazy, but just clean the extra out. And it makes sense to use a molybdenum-based grease. You don't really want to use a polyurea grease because it's less compatible. This molybdenum grease is going to work with what's already inside the motor. So stay away from polyurea probably and stick to a moly grease. So you can see how I'm just greasing the faces, the teeth of the outer planetary gears here. These are the composite gears. Just going to grease the teeth of those, and then I'm going to try to distribute the grease some and add a little extra lubrication. Now you notice how all of the teeth are evenly coated here. If you're using a brush like I'm using, make sure not to get the brush into the grease because it will chew, the gears will chew the brush right up if you get the brush into the gears. And so I'm just running the motor forwards and backwards in order to distribute the grease around. And you can see with this red grease, I can tell that I've got a fine coating on the faces of all the gears. You want to be sure not to fill up the vent ports on the motor here. Those help with cooling. You don't want to pack those full of grease. Those need to be open. You need to be able to see the windings under there. So don't jam those full of grease. This isn't about drenching the motor. This is about getting an even, clean coat. And once you've got that, you can take your internals back and you can get ready to put them back together with your wheel. You can check the outer ring gear here. This is also a composite gear. The outer ring gear should be fairly clean and evenly coated, just like these planetary gears. And it looks pretty good already. So I'm going to drop it in, and then you'll need to push the axle through the bore in the bearing and line up the holes. And then you'll want to put your screws back in. Thank you, Cliff. So when we retighten these screws, we're going to want to alternate sides like you do with lug nuts in a car. in order to make sure that the clamping force on this side plate is even, or else we're going to be making more trouble than we started with. Again, I'm going to turn the torque way down, and I'm going to turn these in not all the way to start with. It's the same idea if you're using a hand drill, a screwdriver by hand. You screw these in and don't let them touch the side plate. Then you can start putting them in until they touch. Notice I'm alternating screws going straight across in the shape of a star. Now I can go to my lowest click-off torque. So if you were doing it with a hand screwdriver, this would be finger tight. And you want to be sure to apply enough pressure that you're not able to strip the heads out of these screws. And then once you have them finger tight, you can increase your torque to lock them down. And again, don't strip the heads out of your screws. And that means using enough pressure. And now that you've got it back together, you can plug it back in and go for another ride. Okie dokie, there's the motor all greased up. Thank you.